screen a little better. I don't a little one.
I am wretched, hated by the gods. If men don't know my story, then those who discarded my weak body now laugh silently while the disease grows stronger each day. My boy, I am Philoctetes, the keeper of Heracles' bow, whom the generals and Odysseus abandoned. They left me here to die from a snake bite in tattered rags, sleeping in a jagged cave, starving without much food to eat. I only wish the same for them. Imagine my surprise when I woke, the tears I shed, the sound of my sadness. All of the ships in the fleet had vanished. Alone with my suffering, I knew only pain. Time demanded that I scavenge for food with this sacred bow, which saved my life. I would crawl through deep mud on stiff knees, scraping my rotten foot against rocks. When water was scarce, I survived by collecting ice. I spent cold winter nights without a fire, but rubbing stones together for their spark. So you see, I have everything I need here in this cave, except a cure for my ancient affliction. Listen, and I will tell you about this island. Sailors know not to approach its rough shores. It is not a destination for men who know its dangers. Those who chance to end up here take pity on me with clothes and food, but never, when I have asked, offer to take me home. 9 miserable years. That is what they have done to me, the Greek generals and Odysseus. I only pray the Olympian gods visit them with equal suffering. Hi, you are not Philoctetes, you are Eleanor. You're about to give a presentation. You're gonna do great, so just turn around and actually start it. So. I do great, you got this, you got this, hey, you got this. Hi, I'm Eleanor, not Philoctetes. I played Philoctetes in the show Philoctetes, which we put on at K-State. And I also did a research project to accompany this production, which involved collecting data and interviews. So we're gonna get into all of that right now. And I'm gonna introduce myself a little more. Next slide, please. So there's me. I'm a USMC veteran. I have an MFA in creative writing with a minor in English. I have ties myself to the Mediterranean region. My dad's side of the family is from the island of Cyprus, and I wrote a Greek-style tragedy with a copy of my grandfather's epic that I also translated. I have published on the veteran experience and military history, as well as her story, fiction and nonfiction. I'm active in the SVA and other veteran nonprofits. I was the Team RWB social director, and I put on socials. And I did a Salute to Stanza poetry sharing event last year, which was what it sounds, poetry shared. Anybody could come and share, and a lot of veterans shared. Tracy Brimhall, the poet laureate of Kansas, came, so that was pretty cool. I've given academic presentations and guest lectured, like in the politics of war at UC Denver. It was a class. And I'm really passionate about anybody who's touched by war. I was doing some work with refugee resettlement at the time. Oftentimes refugees, they help us in these conflicts. There are translators and things like that. And then they come here seeking asylum, and they don't have a really streamlined process to becoming citizens. So I think that that's super important. My family was displaced when they were in Cyprus during that conflict in the 70s. I have years of experience in professional theater, and I'm working toward my MA in drama therapy. And while I was here at Kansas State, I also did an internship at the SRU, which is the Soldier recovery unit in Fort Riley. And that was really awesome. And I will actually have my MA in drama therapy in just a few weeks if I do well on this presentation and my paper was all squared away for it. Slide, please. And before I get into the origin of the project real quick too, I just want to say we are going to be covering some heavy stuff. So if anybody at any time wants to leave, no harm, no foul. I have some resources out on the table for Lafine and other mental health resources around campus. We have Ariana Williams here, who is a Lafine counselor, and you can contact Lafine and get a hold of her too. She's the representative for the veteran population here on campus. And that's about it. I think I have to say about that. But yeah, no, we have a prop closet filled with toys if you need to just go in there. No hard feelings. Do what you need to do. Self-care is important. So the origins of the project. A few years ago, I guess quite a while ago, the Warrior Chorus, which is a traveling show that veterans put on, and they show classic literature. They train in it, and then they present and go to different places and schools and military installations. Came to campus, and David specifically, I think, was just really moved by it. David McKay was our director for the show, and he's the director of the K-State Theater program. And I think since then, maybe he just was thinking, I really want to do a Greek tragedy someday and have veterans involved. So he talked to Sally Bailey, the head at the time of the drama therapy department, and she talked to me. And then we got the ball rolling as far as recruitment and doing tryouts and things like that. And this is the first project where the drama therapy graduate candidate acted as a component of their project. Next. So drama therapy is not just acting in a play, but for this case, the play was the intervention. Drama therapy is a very wide, it encompasses a lot of embodiment and co-collaboration with facilitators that are trained drama therapists, and it can be role play, it can be improv, it can be a lot of things. It can be puppet work, and it can even be things like costume design and mask making and things like that. So in this case, the drama therapy being done was the play. Next slide. So the Greeks are basically credited for creating theater. So that's really cool. And I saw a picture being taken. Feel free to take any pictures you'd like. There's going to be some like sources that pop up, and I cited a lot of research within my research. So please take a picture of anything that you want to take a picture of, because like I'm not going to have time to fully go through each research study that comes up. So the first actor was Thespius, hence the name thespian, which is what we refer to people who study theater. And there were many rule and ceremonial enactments in other places of the world as well, I should mention. I think probably the first like rituals were done with shamans and various indigenous tribes from the steppes to North America, South America, and that shouldn't be discredited. But when we talk about like Western theater as we know it with scripted plays, the Greeks are credited for inventing that. And that's really why this project is so cool, because it's never been measured. How well does this actually apply still today? The actual origins and original use of theater, can it still hold up? Because it was in order to process war. They often had younger members of the society play out the scenes that a lot of the people in the audience, the old retired generals and things like that, had experienced firsthand. So they got to witness back and be like this role reversal of what they went through. Next slide. So I want to know, and this was my kind of basis of this research study, can theater be useful in the context of its original intended purpose of grappling with war? What are the experiences of actors and a community viewing or being part of a mixed population show within a society where veterans are both embedded and misunderstood? Yes. Joe. The Onion, right? New evidence reveals ancient Greeks immediately regretted inventing theater. In fact, I'm hoping to prove the opposite, and I don't think that's true either, because they did it for thousands of years from the Hellenistic period to Rome. So next. These are just a few of my book sources. I cite some studies as well. All that you've seen here is God is the script that Philoctetes is in. This is just Philoctetes, but there's a collection of Greek plays that Brian Dories did also translate and do more current vernacular versions of, which are all in that book. And this is the book that was, this is just Philoctetes. Theater of War is Brian Dories' explanation of his Theater of War program. And he wrote a autobiographical type book about that. Ancient Wars is one of the anthologies that I cited in my paper, along with this one over here, Combat Trauma in the Ancient Greeks. They had many articles, not research studies, but just analyses of how Greek theater applies to modern society, what lessons can we take from it, how do veterans view it, and things like that. Achilles in Vietnam is basically just a big case study almost, and it uses Achilles as the character in his story. And then there's interwoven interviews and recollections from service members of Vietnam that reflect that story. He also did one called Odyssey in America, which was more current wars, later wars. Next slide, please. Take a little sip. So usually when we think of war depicted in art, we think of movies. And it's really important that movies are, if they're going to try to depict actual historical battles and experiences, that they are accurate. And there's a growing need for military advisors and coordinators. And part of this project too, I was thinking those people should be trauma informed, and they could also potentially be veterans. And how do depictions of war impact viewers? There is a lot of research and just articles too about like what some of these movies did when they came out and how people reacted to them. Saving Private Ryan had such strong reactions that like hotline numbers had to be developed so that people could call in and talk about how it maybe had activated them or their reactions to it. Because oftentimes we see these films and there's no opportunity to process them with anyone. You're just maybe even alone, which can be very hard. Talking about film too, the I Was There model is a really important thing to bring up because it is a model that Benjamin Patton, who was related to the General Patton that some of you might be thinking of, he developed this model, and it's for veterans to tell their stories and then make a short film with it. And then after that, they get to witness it back, which is a little unique. You don't obviously get to see yourself performing when you're on stage. So that's really noteworthy and related to this. There's a lot of other media art projects. I didn't cover much past film because it would have been a really extensive deep dive into the research, but the National Endowments of the Arts have a creative forces program, which is they fund different art projects for veterans in different spaces. And they have a growing body. They have their own, like, on their website, list of all the articles and all the data they've collected. The Henry Jackson Foundation of Military Medicine is another one. Slide, please. Okay, so here's like I said, there's been other research. There has been some on narrative. These have all been like the I Was There film project done with nonfiction. So it's always veterans actually telling their own story. And then the second one was done in the UK that I have listed here, which is interesting to note because it's not just happening in the US and not just US service members are affected by these same themes. Next slide, please. I just want to touch on, you can read some of this, I probably won't go through it all, but there's a lot of classical literature things that still are really resonant today. A lot of the terms we still use today in just regular everyday life and practice are derived from the ancient Greeks. Next slide. So I talked about how all the studies have basically been nonfiction. There's been one model that's been studied a few times, and it's called the Decruit model. And it was done using veterans. It was done using Shakespeare for veterans. So that was also another study model, and it's been replicated a few times. The last study I read about it, it was done by pulling all the studies that have happened so far and comparing data, and they still feel like it's probably not enough data to make a clear definitive answer, like, is this a good thing, even though most of all the studies with nonfiction and fiction have brought back good results, and it shows that people felt like it benefited them. All right, next slide. What's that line doing? Here with veterans. This is more just not studies, but I won't go through it all. This is a great one if you want to take a picture, because there are so many things that are being done with veterans. Parts in the Armed Forces was Adam Driver's, and I found out that actually dissolved. I actually found this out the other day because I was checking what year they were on. They had like alternating years for screenplay writers and playwriters to submit, but most of these are active. Re-entry and Basic Track Live are both. They were ethnodramas that were done by collecting interviews of veterans and then putting on a show based on those verbatim responses that the veterans gave. Right, next slide. And these are just some studies done, not necessarily with what does a performance do for veterans and what does it mean to be in self-revelatory theater. These are just some studies that were done on drama therapy, like groups with veterans. The first one did have a culminating performance, but it also went through other stages of the drama therapy model. And there was like just regular group work. So I put that under here. Next slide, please. This is the social atom, which is a really big thing when we talk about role and what makes up a person and their support network. And I just want to note that within, and this is a psychotherapy journal, the civilian and Army social atom here, we could just say military, are very different. And when you go from the military to civilian, yours drastically quickly changes. You lose this whole social atom. You lose all these people that are within your support network and that you interact with every day. So transitioning is a big thing for veterans. Next slide. PTSD, family, and community. Where did this line come from? You see this blue line, right? I'm not imagining this line. Post-traumatic stress disorder, symptomology, implications of female veteran, partners of PTSD with veterans. So we see that people who interact with veterans on a regular basis who have PTSD, and this can also just be self-diagnosed or undiagnosed PTSD, experience sometimes secondary PTSD. So they take on the symptoms of their partners or their parents, etc. And we've also started to do some research into how these traits and these stressors might be passed down through our genetics, through epigenetics. There's a study that traced higher ACE. Somebody just joined and their mic is on, please turn it off. Somebody did this study and that name, Thomas Shalaka. They found that actually higher certain fatty acids in breast milk do affect the genetic makeup of the offspring when the mother had high ACE scores, which is like childhood trauma. So I think that's a really similar thing could happen with spouses or even women who serve, who have children. They can pass, we don't fully know how things can be genetically passed on, but they are, and trauma ripples through generations, not just because of the witnessing implications, but because of the genetic implications. That's why I put this little ripples. And then when you have a bunch of ripples in a pool, right, they're gonna like collide with each other within society. There's been studies about family and challenges that families have and how resilient they are. And talking about collective trauma and how communities cope and heal with natural disasters and other large-scale traumatic events, like things like you could think of obviously 9/11. And so, some really profound work in PSD was The Body Keeps the Score by Vander Kolk and Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. This is a bit newer, and she really talks about how, you know, all of our trauma shouldn't be compared to each other, and it shouldn't be so taboo, and it should not be talked to each other about. So that's really important to know. And whoever's got their mic on, they can mute it. So let's go to the next slide. So let's just talk about the play really quick. It was originally by Sophocles, and Brian Dories is the one that, like I said, translated it, and that's the one that we did for our production here at KSU. Next slide. And the plot of the play real quick. So Philoctetes is stranded on a Greek island. And he is left there because he has a really bad snake bite. He's got this festering wound and they don't want to deal with it. The generals don't want to hear his cries. So they're like, let's just leave him here. And he's stuck there for 9 years. And then it turns out that they need his magical bow to win the Trojan War. So they're like, oh, we got to go back and get this guy. And so they go back and get him, and he's mad, understandably. He's just really mad. And he's had all this isolation and trauma and forced homelessness. And Neoptolemus, under Odysseus' orders, is told to trick him to give the bow back. And it's also about Neoptolemus' moral dilemma in following these orders, because he feels wrong about tricking, using dishonesty to get their means. All right, so this is the setting. Kind of self-explanatory. That was the flyer for the event. This is the stage. That's the building, and it looks like a little castle, so I thought that was important to put there. And the drama therapy program here at K-State is the only drama therapy program that is housed in a theater program, so I think that's really cool. Next slide, please. Thank you for the blue line being on. So the process, read through the script, we discussed it, we discussed the themes, how is it impacting people and their first reactions to it. We began rehearsing, and Adam Blodgett ran some different interventions with the actors, and this was warm-ups and games and sharing circles, and de-rolling was also a really important part of that, because we want to make sure that the actors know how to take that character off, like I did in the mirror. That was a de-rolling technique, right? I needed to not be Philoctetes anymore. I needed to be Eleanor again to do what I needed to do here. So I de-rolled quickly. So we went over different de-rolling techniques. And then we put on 4 performances, and these performances also had talkbacks. Next slide, please. Here's just some pictures from the process. And I did get verbal consent from the cast to share these. Next slide. The cast was made up of students at KSU, and the students were either veterans or theater majors. There was 3 undergrad veterans and 3 undergraduate theater majors and 2 drama therapists. And the 3 undergrad veterans and the vets and the theater majors, that was not me, or the other drama therapists were the ones that were surveyed. Go ahead, next slide. The cast was made up of mostly civilians, and this was the Manhattan area, and we're close to Fort Riley. 10% were military affiliated, and 36% said they had no family connection. 59.5 said that they did, and they had the opportunity to explain the level of connection that they had. Slide, please. I made this in Canva. I just wanted to visually show you the intersectionality of community within the audience and the actors. There's veterans and students in the play, and then there was veterans, maybe active duty personnel, and then civilians, teachers, students, whatnot in the audience. Next slide. Here's a little picture of the talkbacks. They were facilitated by Art to Grow. He's right here. He's a retired lieutenant colonel, and he asked us questions. We had the opportunity to talk about our experiences and answer those questions, and then the audience had the opportunity to reflect back some of their experiences as well and what their responses were. So it was a mixed method research study. It was mostly qualitative, but there was quantitative elements because there was this Likert scale, and I did quantify some of the data. It was ethnographic because I was in the process as the researcher, and it was phenomenological, which is just a long word that means like it's looking at a phenomenon, the phenomenon being the play, how we responded to the play. And this was done by surveys, interviews, and the data was also, I pulled a little bit from notes that I took. Next slide. So what I did was I collected all the data, I handed out all the surveys before and after the performance. I typed them all into an Excel sheet. After I had recorded the interviews, then I transcribed them and printed them out, listened to them, and as I listened to them, I highlighted different things to make like themes. I had like 10 as many different color markers as I could, and I would just highlight in the color that I felt like fit with the themes. And then I did theme grouping later, which you'll see. And I found these themes that from early analysis, as I was taking notes and looking at surveys in the beginning. I took notes during the interviews too, and that I suspected might emerge because of what I had read in the literature. Next slide. Okay, so this is really cool. All the actors reported a closer relationship to theater after being in this show. Not just the veterans. They weren't the only ones who said, oh, I think theater is really interesting now that I've done it. Even the cast members who were actors who were just theater majors who have acted quite a while said that they felt like they became closer and understood more of the power of theater. I'll read some of those quotes. This one's from a student, actor, non-veteran. I love to perform and view theater. This performance has helped me view the power of theater in a completely new light. Next one is from an actor who was a veteran. Does somebody want to read it?
I went from knowing almost nothing at all about theater to feeling a strong an appreciation for it. I plan on attending more plays in the future, and if possible, I'd love to act in another.
So there was a strong appreciation that was even gained for theater, and a lot of veterans also in their interview were saying that even like their artistic urges were even sparked, and they wanted to write poetry and they wanted to do other art as a result of it. So that was really neat. Next slide. So I also polled them and asked them if they felt like theater can be beneficial to the community. Before the show, 88.3% thought that it was beneficial. If the answer was maybe, I put no or unsure. And then after, all 100% said that they did feel like theater was beneficial to the community. So that's really cool. Next slide. Same to veterans. Do you feel theater can be beneficial? There was a little bit more unsureness, but 66.7 said yes. And then afterwards, 100% said yes. Fine. The audience was kind of asked like a combination of these two questions in a Likert scale. And you can see most people said 10 out of 10, yes, 70% they believe that theater can be beneficial to the community and to veterans. And then 5 of the survey takers were military affiliated, to put that in there too. Next slide. So these are the themes. Take them in for a second and look at them because we're going to go through each of them individually. I'm going to drink some water. We're good. Right. Next slide. The reciprocity of knowledge. That was a really cool, important theme. And I put it first because many people said like inclusivity is important, but also they said that learning from each other and doing co-collaborative projects is also equally really cool and important. So also Neoptolemus and Philoctetes friendship also during the show shows this coming together. And I think that's a really great, important theme. Does anyone want to read this quote from one of the student actors? Nice and loud.
I think a lot of the experience was learning. A lot of it was listening to the veterans and obviously not trying to play or caricature anything that they've done, because I find that inappropriate. But listening to them and learning from their experiences to find little ways and nuances to honor their experience.
Thank you. Next slide. So shared trauma connection, pain, moral injury, and secondary PTSD. This is another theme. I have PTSD, trauma encompasses PTSD, and I asked about PTSD. So that wasn't like a theme that emerged per se, but a lot of people talked about how, you know, they've witnessed PTSD in their parents. I had a lot of audience members that I interviewed who were children of veterans, and they really talked about how they didn't know how to help them. And a lot of people also said like they weren't sure on how accurately they could speak to trauma because they hadn't really experienced it or they weren't diagnosed with PTSD. And then they would go on to explain to me a very traumatic situation they had been in. That was really interesting. Next slide. So what is PTSD? Van der Kolk was the first one kind of to start looking into this. The DSM-5 has its own definition, but symptoms are flashbacks, unexplained rage or irritability, difficulty with being present, having nightmares, difficulty concentrating, and hypervigilance. So oftentimes when somebody's very traumatic, they can't process that trauma in a verbal way because of the way trauma is stored in the brain. It's stored in a separate place than where language is stored. So when somebody experiences something that reminds them of the trauma, they go into fight or flight, their frontal cortex slows down. It's almost like they're experiencing the traumatic event again. So that's why talk therapy might not be as helpful for veterans, especially and people who have trauma. And it's really important to note, like I said before, that people self-diagnose, don't consider themselves to be people who have experienced trauma, but that doesn't mean that their stories don't matter about trauma. That doesn't mean that we compare them. So that's important too. Next slide. So this kind of speaks for itself. Why don't we read the two quotes? Integration of veterans into society through theater. Who would like somebody read this one nice and loud?
Help with getting rid of stigmas about stuff as well. Like we're all just hermits and just want to be by ourselves and have crazy war stories and arsenals of guns or something.
A student veteran said that. That wasn't obvious. And let's read this one. This was from a veteran that was interviewed, that was in the audience.
Theater gives veterans a group coming out of the military. You don't have a group. People you knew, you don't know anymore. Your 4 years are separated at least, so you're looking for a community wherever it may be. I think theater is a great place to find community.
Yeah, so a lot of people recognize like the way that you work towards a common goal is really similar in both theater and the military. Next slide. Another theme was how we rarely talk about trauma. There's not spaces to talk about trauma. and we're almost discouraged from it. It's like there's not an appropriate time or place to talk about these things. Go ahead and read these to ourselves. Next slide. So there was a big critique, as I suspected, of other media, and people brought up war films and how they don't accurately portray the experience. There's often a lot of discrepancies in war films, like a ranking signal will be upside down. There's like this common belief that they have to do it, and that's not actually true. It went to the Supreme Court before, and it was debunked. Like if you're doing art and you're not clearly trying to impersonate a service member, you can be as accurate as you want to be. And I think there's also a fear of like the Pentagon coming for veterans who want to write out their stories because you're gonna maybe give out secrets or you're gonna admit to something that you could get court-martialed for and pulled back into the military. So there's all this fear about like who should tell these stories and like how do we tell these stories. In fiction, like this show, kind of gives like that buffer like of distance between, you know, reality and past, even though it's still very applicable. There's Slaughterhouse-Five by Vonnegut, and he talks about war, but it's fictionalized and it's in a very surreal way. So then in one of those stories, maybe accuracy wouldn't be as important, but we don't see a lot of depictions of war that aren't trying to be really accurate, and then they mess it up a lot. And another thing we talked a lot about, like in the talkback that happened after we had done the show, we went and did a reading at the Museum of Art and Light. This came up just in one interview, so I didn't know how important it was, but one of the student actors just said they were kind of nervous because they didn't know if they were like right to tell the story because it was like a war story because they hadn't served. But then the student veterans who were actors during this talkback kind of talked about like they didn't know if they were right because they were just given the honor to be in the show and they had no acting experience. So there's this huge like hesitancy about who should be telling these stories. And I think that stops a lot of it from being told. Next slide. So theater can also be an escape, an outlet, and it allows for distancing. This is really self-explanatory, right? Like I've been talking about being in something that's fictional. It's not you. You play that role, you experience the catharsis, and then you go home and you get to be yourself again. Here are some quotes. You could read them really quick. Next slide. So moral injury was another huge theme that came up, and this is coined by Charles Shea. It's a term that often isn't inseparable from PTSD, but we don't talk about it. It's the trauma that occurs when you're asked to do something that goes against your moral compass, which is what was represented in the character Neoptolemus. He didn't want to trick Philoctetes into giving them the bow. He felt like that was against his personal agency, but he was forced to do that anyway. And then I have one. This quote down here is from a student actor. They're all student actors, but from a student actor that was here. Next slide. So, like I just said, that's what moral injury is. I think we're all getting tired, so I want to play a little game of ball. Don't scare, it's okay, it's a game. Will you put this on? Because you're an expert. You're an expert in ball. You're a trauma therapist, so I've now blindfolded I've blindfolded one of the ball players.
Oh, gosh.
The stakes are higher. Ready. She's got her hands out. She's got her blindfold on.
Who knows?
Okay, Jack, I'm coming for you. All right.
Nope. Whenever you're ready, I can take that back up here.
Oh, I'm afraid of knocking over the laptop.
Oh,
I
that's
trust
a good
myself. I
call.
trust myself.
I did that because we were bored, but it also had a purpose, right? Because trust is dependent on expectation and the information we have and perception, right? So we did actually throw the ball to the blindfolded person, which is really special. But sometimes maybe you wouldn't trust somebody if you have information. And sometimes trust is a leap of faith, and you have to trust somebody because you lack the knowledge to do so otherwise, which is also what happened in the play. Philoctetes had really very few options and nowhere to turn, so he did trust and gave his go over to Neoptolemus at one point. Next slide. Avoidance. This was another. You might avoid services or friends or people that you think could help you, right? Because they're blindfolded and you don't think that they're competent, or you've been betrayed by them in the past. So something that came up a lot was that people felt like they were avoiding their own pain, and that seeing the show made them think about that, like that they fester on things, and that dealing with the other services might have just not felt worth it to them in different ways. This was said by a bunch of veterans regarding the VA and family members. And one young woman said, in foster care, they'd be like, oh yeah, we're trying to help you. But it all felt very twisted because of just my personal experience. So watching the play reminded me a lot of that. Next slide. Metaphors came up too. People saw the special herb that Philoctetes needed for his wound as alcohol, drugs, other things like that, unhealthy coping mechanisms. The screams, they didn't just see it as reactions to physical pain, they saw it as reactions to emotional pain and their own pain as well. The bow, the young woman in foster care also brought up the bow, and she said that it made her think of her siblings that got taken away from her. She was so close to them. The foot, a lot of people saw the foot too, just this injury as something maybe that was physical, but it's also something emotional that's carried, right? Next slide. Here's where I just quantified the feelings a little bit. So this column here are the emotions that are evoked on the far right. And then we have the far right in the second column group too, as emotions evoked by the cast. So cast, audience. As you can see, some of these emotions overlapped, and they're also ranked in how often they were mentioned too in that column. And it's interesting that some of these feelings that were described weren't necessarily feelings maybe that the audience felt themselves, but that the characters were feeling. So their mirror neurons were at work. They were actually really emphasizing with and feeling the pain. So something that Dory said was that even if feelings are uncomfortable, at least they're being shared, and that's really important. Dory's is the one who has theater of war and translated the book, the play. All right, next slide. So some really notable moments from the text itself and moments that came up were just the talkbacks as a whole. People talked about, and something else that Dory said is that during the talkbacks, the audience actually becomes the main character, and they're the ones sharing, they're the ones telling you how it affected them. So that's really, really cool. And that was something that stuck with the cast members, especially, that it was just that reciprocity was felt really both ways. I'm the sucker who was fooled by the great liar. That's a line that Philoctetes said. This line provoked some discussion about some people feeling maybe like within the cast that their military service was for nothing, and other people thinking like, well, then what was mine for? Like, why did my friends die? And things like that. So that was a moment where we processed, and then we came back together as a cast. You're the shameful son of a noble father. I hope you die with the rest of the Greeks. This is something that Philoctetes said to me at Ptolemais when he realized he tricked them. This was also something that came up for people when actor who was a veteran said that hearing that over and over felt like a their personal experience. But then they also said that witnessing that line and the screaming also helped them stop having, they believed it helped them stop having a recurring nightmare they were having where they yelled at them. Everything is repugnant to a man who contradicts his own nature. That's something Ptolemy said to Odysseus. And this also goes back to that like moral injury. Like it hurts to do something that you wouldn't want to do. And this is a line that came up in interviews with audience members. They thought that this was really good. And there was more, but these are just four. Next slide. So de-rolling, I want to talk about quick too, because I asked about how de-rolling went after the show, after we had done some de-rolling together, after we had given the cast some information, Adam and I, about how to de-roll. So there was some examples, listening to music, just being with friends. Surprisingly, the veterans who were acting in the show said that they left there and they didn't feel like they needed to de-roll. They said they didn't feel like they brought anything back with them, or they just really said that like it felt good to get back into this role that felt familiar to me and I didn't want to take it back off. So that was really interesting. Next slide. So this is a fire plan I made when I was back in the Marines, and the veterans will appreciate this because I just wanted to use this as a visual to talk about how avenues of care shouldn't just be one way. There shouldn't just be one type of therapy or one type of activity that a veteran is doing for their care. There should be, there can be talk therapy, there can be drama therapy. As you see, creative arts therapy up here. We're gonna do a little activity again. We're gonna send some arrows to PFC Teddy here. What other types of strategies can we use for veterans to help them? It's a love arrow. It's like a Cupid arrow. It doesn't hurt. It helps them.
Connection with nature.
Oh, good one. Any others?
Physical exercise.
Physical exercise.
Connecting with new people.
Oh, he's doing so good. And what's interesting too is like care teams too need to know what areas of coverage the other care teams have. Because if this care team is aiming at the same, your talk therapist is aiming the same way as your drama therapist, you might get overstimulated in certain areas, right? So communication, collaboration, care should be like a fire plan. Care should be thought out. Care should come from different directions and different sources. Next slide, unless you have one more. Does anyone have one more for him? He's pretty enriched. Oh, thank you. It's a good one. All right, next slide. And this had a benefit in the community. I just want to touch on. Dominic Moore interviewed Adam and I for Cats Create, which was a podcast and radio broadcast that went on to the radio. Literature studies students really benefited from getting to read the show and then coming to see it. We did a reading at the Museum of Art and Light, like I mentioned, and they paired our reading with this painting of Odysseus winning the bow for Penelope. And that goes along with the article. So that was really neat. We got some really good feedback from the community. Next slide. So key takeaways. Drama therapy is important, right? Empathy and perspective taking are essential in training with mixed populations and provide accuracy and new insights for viewers. And civilian communities. Barriers highlight the need for safe and structured environments. Feelings can be shared. Hence the talkbacks. Integration through art reduces stigma and promotes belonging. Treatment should be done communally and through multiple avenues. Because it's not just the veteran who is affected by trauma, it's everybody in their social atom. Next. So final reflections. A few limitations I'll just address quickly. This isn't a huge sample size. I can't make definitive conclusions on how beneficial theater is. Much more research needs to be done, but this was the first one measuring great theater, which is really important, and more could be done. You can combine data later on and make some more determinations. Accessibility to view war now on our smartphones, I think, is something that is a future consideration of this, because a lot of us that aren't veterans now are able to see firsthand through a screen, so some distancing, but things that we weren't able to see. Even in the Vietnam era was the first televised war that we ever saw, and now it's getting way more personal from people who are actually posting themselves. Another thing is talking about intimacy and consent work and how that parallels with, having military advisors who are trauma informed, people who are going to know how to make people feel like they have autonomy and they're in control when they're portraying stories of war. There's a lot of plays this could be done with, like Medusa. The reason why she gets ostracized is she is raped, and that is very close right to home. So maybe something like Antigone, which also has female characters, but it's also about advocating for body autonomy. She wants her brother to have a proper burial because he died serving, and then she fights to make sure his body gets back. There's potential for this to be replicated, like I said, for more studies to be done, for more data to be collected, and a potential for a model to emerge, right? We talked about the Decroute model, which was the one that was done with the Shakespeare veterans. The COAT model is another one by Mowers and Wood. That is at Laura Wood is at Lesley University. Levon Aldridge is another drama therapist who is just coming into the field, and he's training under her at Lesley. And he did a research study that involved looking at videos of veterans talking about their trauma that was posted on the Library of Congress and analyzing that for themes. And he's also going into this field. I think that collaboration with other veterans is super important moving forward. I think more veterans should get into drama therapy. It's a super, super reliable job in the arts, and we can make really big change. I know when Marines get together and other veterans, we get stuff done. So that's my last really point on this slide. We can go to the next slide. So this is Sade. He was the owner of the Bow, and he passed away. So I just wanted to talk about, how trauma affects people, and I want to dedicate my project to anybody who's been affected by PTSD, by trauma, by moral injury, and just for those people who are still with us, like, you're not alone. There's help, there's resources, there's support. The bow was given to one of the cast members shortly before Sade passed. I'm not going to read all of this, but he was a true idealist. He shared with his closest friends that his aim was to follow the samurai wisdom, get beyond love and grief, exist for the good of man. He would often say that things come full circle. And I really feel like his gift came full circle. His gift of the bow to his friend was a gift to us for the production. And I hope that it added meaning to the production for all of us, and that this study that came out of that, all of that, is a gift to the arts, to humanity. Thank you. Next slide. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everybody who's here today, who was not told to be here. That it really means a lot. Thank you everybody on Zoom and on Instagram Live. I appreciate you coming out and supporting me and watching the presentation today. Thank you to this man, Sean, who wrote this blog, who I stole his pictures from because they were really good pictures. And if anybody wants to read more about the story of Philoctetes, that's a good blog, and there's a lot of materials out there. Thank you to the K-State Theater Department for collaborating. Sally, to Melissa, to Michelle, like everybody, I appreciate you all so much. Adam, could not have done the drama therapy side without having somebody be doing the interventions, because I had so many other hats being the lead in the show and the researcher. Next slide. And if anybody feels like they still need resources, there's a whole table out on your way out. We have a sheepdog rep, which is, I'll let the sheepdog rep explain it too, but it's a nonprofit for veterans. We have Ariana Williams here. She works at Lafine, and she's, like I said, the veteran representative. So I'll take any questions now if you have any. Yeah.
What was your favorite part about the entire process?
Screaming on stage. It was really cathartic, and it was like fun because like you don't get to not only talk about trauma, you don't get to just express really extreme emotions. It's not socially acceptable for me to just walk into the mall and be like, ah! So like all of that, it was just, especially opening night, I just felt like I was just shaking. I was just like, I was in it, and that was really amazing. Thank you. Yes.
I guess like for the whole project, but specifically with like working with like mixed populations, how did your kind of comparing your kind of expectations before kind of the project really kind of got rolling due to kind of like after the information that you kind of gathered, how does it shape up with your expectations
Good
from
question.
before?
Good question. You mean like of what I thought the themes would have been that emerged?
Yeah, or like I guess more so what I was saying was like no, like working with mixed populations when kind of going from the process of you kind of like planning it and kind of like thinking about kind of how it would function, like how does that shape up your expectations from before to kind of how it actually shaped up?
Okay. I guess I didn't expect everybody to really become as good of friends as they did. Yeah, like the camaraderie was really incredible despite like the age gaps that veterans and undergraduate actors have. That was really incredible. As far as the themes, I know that's not what you're asking, but it made me think.
Yeah.
I thought homelessness might have been more recognized. Because the abandonment was recognized, but not like the tie to the homelessness epidemic that a lot of veterans in society face. Oh, people online, you don't get to ask questions. How do I think I have to go over here to look at them. I'll be over here.
I think it's right here, Eleanor. They're not in the
Oh, yeah, could somebody read them to me?
Nancy, I think she just raised her hand.
Hi, Nancy, what's your question?
Oh my gosh, wonderful, wonderful presentation. I'm curious next for the veterans that were in the show, if there's any plan of resurveying after a certain time period.
Say that one more time about the surveys.
Do you need me to write it instead?
No, I can hear you now. We're just trying to.
I was asking about what you're doing for the veterans that were in the show. What's next for them? What is put out there for them to be able to continue this exploration that might, you know, to keep them from being some kind of letdown after this really amazing experience they had. And I was also interested if you have any, if you've already done or if you have plans for a post survey to see how, as they process all of it, this works for them.
I'll answer that question first, and we're going to mute you again really quick. There's an echo. Okay, so Nancy asked, what are the plans now going forward, basically? If there's going to be a post-show interview. If Sally Bailey will let me reopen the project, yeah, maybe I will do a post-show interview at some point. I would love to publish this work, and it's my intention and plan to. So if that seems like something that would be necessary as far as that. I did, to answer the question too, I checked in with the veterans that were in the cast just to see how they were doing. It was really good to do that reading that David arranged for us at the Museum of Art and Light, because we all got to get back together and see each other one more time and just like check in. I did give everyone a book that I thought would be helpful. I gave the student actors this book too. It's by Michael Ramos. He's a friend of mine. He runs the publishing lab at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And it's talking about being in the military and coming home and transitioning back into the civilian world. And it's a collection of his nonfiction essays. So I thought that would be helpful for them to continue the journey and the processing. Good question, Nancy. Thank you. Did I answer it? If there's no more questions, then I guess this is it. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all coming. Too, I didn't give David a special thanks, but this all couldn't have happened without David. You know, this was partially David's idea, and just so helpful and listened to the veterans throughout the process and took their advice on how we should do specific things and things like that.
So now we're going to ask
Put your live recording on.